gotta kind of psych myself up. What am I gearing up for? Got like a hat on. Okay. So again, this is whirlwind, right? So we left off, and we got all these Germanic tribes in the Western Roman Empire now. And the church is going to be like, okay, we were given this mission: go and preach to all nations, make disciples of all peoples. And on one hand, right, we have this idea today, like, well, how dare they, right? Like, I mean, they're the barbarians, they got their life, leave them alone, let them live, let live. What right does the church have to tell people the way to live and that they should follow Jesus, right? But see, this is where, as Catholics, we have this very deep understanding of the intrinsic value of every human person and the desire for the salvation of souls. That people will know Jesus, will have the faith so that they can get to heaven. It's not so much we're telling you that you're wrong, we're saying this way, we've got a better way. This way will get you to heaven. You'll know Jesus, it'll transform your life. Things are actually going to be better about your life, and ultimately, we care about our eternal destination, which is heaven. So it's not a case necessarily of our way is right, your way is wrong. No, we love you, we care about you. Even though you're this nasty German barbarian dude, we want you to get to heaven someday. And we know the way to do that. And that's very much the way the church is going to approach this. So we've got these barbarian tribes, very warlike. If they've got a culture, it's a very rough and tumble one. A lot of them are uneducated, they're pagan. But they're also the minority, right? They've moved into the Roman Empire, but they're not Romans. And they're kind of this controlling, ruling minority at the time. So in a lot of ways, the gospel that the church is going to preach to them is not only the gospel of salvation, but it's also the gospel of civilization, right? Because in some ways, it's the culture, the civilization, the learning, the language, the customs, the traditions, the economic and governmental structures of Rome. So it's again, we're seeing this kind of marrying together of the faith, but also politics and even civilization at its core. This is where we start to see bishops not only as spiritual leaders, but also as political and in some cases even military leaders when it comes to the defense of people in their diocese. So how does this even become possible, right? How do you even go about this task? Well, a lot of the missionaries are going to be these monks and nuns that are coming from the monasteries, right? They've withdrawn, kind of gotten their act together, and then they're going to go out from there and preach to these peoples. Another, of course, is the very important role of women throughout all of human history. We're going to have a lot of Christian princesses marrying pagan husbands and working for the conversion of them, of their chieftain husbands. And then we also see a case where kind of after the king or the chief of these tribes convert, kind of the whole population follows along. And that's very much the case of the Franks, who were originally a Germanic tribe settled in Gaul, which is modern-day France. And they're the first of the barbarian tribes to be converted to Christianity. So there was a bishop in Gaul, and he set up a marriage between the Christian princess, Saint Clotilda, and Clovis, who was the chieftain of the Franks. Saint Clotilda worked tirelessly for the conversion of her husband, praying for him, setting a good example, telling her about the Christian God. And then in 497, Clovis is looking like he's going to be defeated by another Germanic tribe. But he remembers this God of his wife, and he's like, so God, if you help me win this battle, I'll give in to her and I'll convert. And literally that's what happens. The Franks win an unprecedented or an unforeseen victory against this other tribe. The Franks are victorious, so Clovis and 3,000 of his soldiers are baptized as Christians. So again, somewhat of a similar thing that happened with Constantine. Clovis, he prayed, said, hey, you help me out here, I'll convert, and he did. So that's what happened with the Franks. Clovis will go on to unite Gaul, which again is loosely defined as modern-day France. He's going to found this Frankish dynasty of kings and chieftains that rule over the Franks. And that's this day why France is referred to as the eldest daughter of the church, because the Franks, the people that lived in France, are the first to convert wholesale to Christianity. So France, and that's a title that France even holds today, eldest daughter of the church. And it's going to set up this special relationship between the Frankish people and the popes going forward. In a lot of ways, the Franks will become the champions and kind of, I don't want to say military arm, but like political clout behind the popes. There's kind of a special relationship that develops there. Any discussion of early conversion among these faraway lands or barbaric peoples would be remiss without mentioning St. Patrick, right? Patron saint of Ireland. This is a great story. So as a 13-year-old boy, he's the son of a Roman official in Britain, and he's kidnapped by Irish pirates and taken to Ireland, where for 6 years he serves as a slave, not necessarily hard labor, but as a herdsman, tending sheep out in the fields for 6 years. Eventually he escapes and returns to Britain, where when he's studying to become a priest, he has a dream where all these people that he met in Ireland are saying, Patrick, Patrick, come back to us. And he's like, what are you talking about? I didn't want to be there in the first place. I was enslaved there. I got the heck out of there. Well, it was God calling him eventually to return to Ireland, where he was actually had that interior conversion that this is what God is calling me to do. I'm being called to go back to where I was enslaved. And in the 430s, he was made a bishop and sent back to Ireland by the Pope. He's going to have great success converting the people of Ireland, the Celts or the Celts. Going to be opposed by the Druids, who are the kind of the pagan leaders of the religion there. But within a generation, the island of Ireland will largely be converted to Christianity. And that's very much a tradition that holds, true to this day. Irish Catholics. I mean, goes back to 430s and Saint Patrick. In Ireland, he's going to found monasteries. These are going to be a little bit different. The Irish monasteries do not follow the Benedictine rule. They're more of they come from more the Eastern tradition, more austerity, sleeping on stone beds, sleeping with wet blankets, going out and standing in the river when it's freezing cold and praying. Not so much a denial of the body, but kind of denial of oneself and an infliction of suffering to move beyond that, right? And to focus on interior peace and the connection of one's soul to God. So it's not surprising why the Benedictine rule becomes much more popular, because we want to live and be monks, but this seems really, really hard. But those are the Irish monks, and they'll be very influential. Again, it'll be from these Irish missionaries that a lot of missionary work will be back done on mainland Europe. And these monasteries were centers of learning. This is where they copied the great manuscripts of Greece and Rome. This is where education and literacy still endured. I mean, all the Greek philosophers and Roman laws and Aristotle and Plato, those writings that we have preserved today are due to the work in the monks in these monasteries that gathered these books and works, but then also copied them and preserved them for future generations. The ancient texts and the ancient scriptures. So in a lot of ways, the monasteries are responsible for the saving of Western knowledge. Again, general population is not educated at this point. So this whole idea, again, about the church being anti-science and anti-education is totally bogus. The earliest monks are the ones saving this knowledge. Yes?
It's actually a very interesting book called How the Irish Saved Civilization by Cahill. And he's not a Christian author, but he's a hardline historian, and he makes a very good case for that.
Yep.
It's a good read, too.
Very much so.
He also wrote a book about Paul, interestingly enough, Desire of the Everlasting Hills.
So yeah, a lot of these monks are the ones copying down, I've heard of that, I have, copying down this knowledge. So that's why, you guys see that Xerox commercial from 15 years ago, where there's a bunch of these monks at a copy machine. It's like, this is great! like old-timey habits and hoods, they love this thing! That's where that comes from. They were literally copying these things down by hand in the great illuminated manuscripts. So again, you can't make this stuff up, right? Patrick, he's kidnapped and taken there as a slave, so he learns the language and learns the people, and 30 years later God sends him back to be their bishop and converts the whole island. You can't, contingency, you can't make this stuff up. And so that's St. Patrick. Another great benefit of these Irish monks, they're going to be ones that promote the idea of frequent reception of the sacrament of reconciliation. It's not something you kind of put off to the end and do one great confession at the end of your life, which was somewhat of a practice in the rest of the world. They're like, no, this is something that should be received more frequently. It's an ongoing process throughout your life, kind of continuous conversion. So that's one of the doctrinal things that come from the Irish monks, is this idea that confession, regular penance, is something that we do normal. It's part of life. It's not something we just kind of put off to the end and do one great time. So I would probably get stoned if I talked about the Irish but not the English. So we have to go back to St. Gregory the Great, and there's this wonderful story, Pope St. Gregory the Great, who we just talked about. He's walking in the streets of Rome, and he sees these tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed foreigners that are being sold as slaves. And he asks, who are these people? And somebody tells him, well, those are Angles from England. And Pope Gregory says, not Angles, but angels. They looked angelic to him. Again, it's long, flowing, blonde hair and blue eyes. He never forgets about them. When he's Pope, he's going to send St. Augustine of Canterbury as his personal emissary to the Angles and the people lived on the island and area of England and Britain. He sends St. Augustine there with 40 monks. Go and minister to these people. St. Augustine of Canterbury is going to meet with King Ethelbert of Kent. And Ethelbert was married to a Frankish princess named Bertha. Ethelbert doesn't convert right away, but he welcomes the monks. Yep, you're welcome to be here. You can actually stay in my palace. St. Augustine Saints of Canterbury is kind of his headquarters. And eventually, in 597, King Ethelbert and 10,000 of his Saxon subjects are baptized on Christmas Day in 597. And no doubt in little, again, I'm sure in great due to Princess Bertha and her work on her husband and the people of the Anglo-Saxons in England. So again, this is kind of what happens, is the king converts and a lot of the people would go along with him. So problematic in terms of the baptisms. They had to go down to, they literally go down to the river and do mass baptism. But, so that's how the Christian faith came to England. Of course, I have to stop and talk here about Saint Venerable Bede, who is the patron saint of historians, famous for writing the Ecclesiastical History of the English Peoples, one of the first comprehensive writings of history in the Western tradition. So in grad school, I got very chummy with Saint Bede. He's the one that came up with the whole BC in AD designations and made that more popular, as far as kind of standardizing is the way we view dates and times in history. And he's known as Venerable Bede because he was venerated and kind of renowned and famous even before he was made a saint. So Saint Bede, but often Saint Venerable Bede because he went by Venerable Bede after he died. People did like him. So shout out to Saint Bede. If any of you in college have history papers or stuff, that kind of stuff, Saint Bede will help you out. Germany, at least what we conceive as of modern day Germany. Again, the maps of Europe have changed so much. But the apostle to the Germans, Saint Boniface, born in England. He was one of these Benedictine monks in England, and he felt called to minister to the Germanic tribes in what we conceive of as modern day Germany. And he did not have good success at all. In fact, he despaired and woe is me and I'm the worst missionary ever, until he cut down the oak of Thor and was not immediately struck down. So often in art you'll see St. Boniface with this axe and he's got like his robes on and he's just viciously chopping down this oak of Thor. It was thought that this was a special tree to the god of Thor, so he chopped it down and the people were like, oh, this is going to be great, he's totally going to get fried by a lightning bolt. And it didn't happen, so they're like, this dude's got something. So after that he got a lot of moral clout among the German people. He was able to found monasteries in Germany. It was kind of the symbolic thing that gave him a lot of popularity in terms of maybe we should listen to this guy. Be the one to set up a lot of the bishop dioceses and ecclesiastical structures in Germany. Of course, I have to also talk about Central and Eastern Europe. So my name, right, Michael Anthony Giannetti, is about as Italian sounding as it gets. But I'm only half Italian, actually. My other half is Slovak, Slovenian, and Croatian. And St. Cyril and Methodius are famous for ministering to these people of Central and Eastern Europe. They were two Greek brothers, and they were actually sent to Central and Eastern Europe from Constantinople. The emperor in Constantinople sent them there. And they will invent the Cyrillic alphabet, named after St. Cyril. That's the alphabet that the Russians and the Orthodox Church even use to this day. St. Cyril's the one that came up with that. Ministered to the Slavs in that area. They celebrated Mass in the Slavonic languages, translated the Bible and other other literature into the Slavonic languages. That's why they came up with the alphabet, and had great success ministering to these people kind of in their native language, not in Latin or Greek. So when the German missionaries in this area were scandalized, oh, you're using a profane language, you have to be using Latin, blah, 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 blah. So Cyril and Methodius went and talked to the Pope, and the Pope was like, yeah, it's totally fine. You can absolutely use the Slavic languages. That's totally right. So this is almost a predestination or a precursor, right, of the whole Vatican II thing, right? You know, Latin, and then post-Vatican II being able to say Mass in the language of the people where it's at. Again, all this stuff is precedent. There was a precedent 1,500 years before that ever happened. But again, it's also funny, this still divided. Oh, Latin is the right magic word now. That's totally bogus stuff. Cyril Methodius, and it's funny. They're known as Saint CNM. My family's from Barberton, huge Slovak Slovenian area. Saint Cyril Methodius Church. I didn't know it was Saint Cyril Methodius. They just call it CNM. CNM. I heard about it for years. Saint Cyril and Methodius. Wildly popular, even among the people of that area and in American communities today. So these are just, I mean, this is France, this is England, these are the big places. Dozens, hundreds of other examples of, and these guys are known, yeah, the apostles to the Slavs, Saint Boniface, apostle to Germany. I mean, again, this idea that they were the first ones to bring Christianity to these peoples. And also, it's such a disservice to talk about history. It sounds like they go, they have great success, everybody's Christian. Not necessarily, you know, but they did have great success there, it's a growth. But it's not like, oh yeah, they're all happy little, often perfect little Christians, and you've got these, no, I mean, there's problems just like all the time. And oftentimes they would convert, and then you've got these heresies that come through and confuse everybody. So again, all these things are happening simultaneously, but there have to be 12 of me up here talking at the same time. Again, that's that chronology part that's hard. These whole things are happening simultaneously. So then we get kind of moving it up to about the year 1000 to a certain extent. And is this where? Yeah. So as we've kind of indicated, we're starting to have this divide between the East and the West more and more, especially with the fall of Rome, all the missionary activities. A lot of it's being directed, you know, out of Rome. The Roman popes and the people of the Western Roman Empire are kind of looking out for themselves because the emperor in Constantinople's kind of got his own problems. They speak Latin, right, in the Western Roman Empire. It's a lot of Greek in the Eastern Roman Empire. There's differences of culture and geography. There's these struggles for political and also religious power. The church in the West is becoming more and more affiliated with these Germanic tribes, which the people in Constantinople considered barbarians and backwards and uneducated, whereas Constantinople is still kind of the last vestige of the old Roman Empire. And people in the East are also very much concerned about the rise of Islam in the Middle East and continued Islamic attacks against the outposts of Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. So kind of different geography, different cultures, different concerns, different things that they're doing. And this is also going to have repercussions in the church as well. And one of the big conflicts will be the iconoclasm, or how do I say it? Iconoclasm controversy. So this idea of icons, right? You guys know what an icon is?
Symbol.
It's a symbol, and in religious context, you know what an icon is? It's a picture. That literally is an icon. Of St. Clair, that's what an icon looks like, okay? So there's this tradition of having, what, statues and pictures to remind us of the saints. Pictures of Mary, pictures of Jesus. And there was this controversy about, especially in the Eastern Empire, worried about idolatry, right? That people are praying to these things rather than being symbols that remind us of these things. And this did occur. Undue veneration, burning of incense to statues and pictures rather than helping us to lift our minds, actual worshiping of the objects of themselves. So an iconoclast is an icon breaker. Somebody, this is a bad idea, we got to destroy these things. People are getting their religion all twisted. This is very popular in the Eastern Roman Empire. Of course, this is not actually what the church teaches. These things aren't intrinsically bad, it's just they're being misused. So God raises up St. John of Damascus, who's known as an iconophile, a lover of icons, a defender of icons. He said these are things that help us to pray. And that God becoming man, in a way, implicitly gave us permission to depict God. Because, yeah, because we can actually draw a picture of Jesus because he was a human. We know what humans look like. We can actually paint Jesus. It's an implicit permission that this is okay for us to do.
Mike, a little thing about icons.
Yes.
Is that to learn to do icons is it's very strict. It's very formulaic.
Oh yeah.
But the monks and, well, the people, the artists who paint the icons actually say that they pray the icon because they do intense prayer and meditation, and it's a very meditative process. So you can read about what the different colors symbolize and the different postures, all of that kind of thing. It can be very interesting if you're into artwork.
So this is a controversy that would actually rage in the church, kind of along east-west, and it seems kind of a petty little argument to us today. But there were religious implications, there were political backfighting as a result of this. I know and also it was an influence by, so in Islam, right, it is 100% strict. You do not portray Muhammad or Allah in art, zero whatsoever. And this is in the Eastern Roman Empire, and the emperor in Constantinople was like, maybe we would have more success with converting these Muslims to Christianity if we didn't have all these pictures and statues that they're not cool with. So again, it became more of a political thing. Maybe I can co-opt these people to accept Christianity easier if we get rid of icons and pictures. So again, it really wasn't a spiritual component at all. It was like, I need to protect my Eastern Roman Empire, and these guys are knocking my door down all the time. So that was a big controversy. It's gonna reign between the East and the West for a long time. Since I'm a great person historian, I have to talk about Charlemagne. And in the 700s, the church again is very affiliated with the Frankish people, the Franks in France, and the Franks protecting the Catholic Church against the Lombards, which is another group another barbarian tribe that comes through. And also, the popes and the people in the Western Roman Empire, you can't count on Constantinople to come and care about our problems, so we got to kind of figure out stuff on our own. So on Christmas Day in the year 800, Pope St. Leo III is going to crown Charlemagne, Charles the Great, as Roman Emperor on Christmas Day 800. So this is this Frankish king that now the Pope is crowning as Emperor. And of course, the people in the Eastern Empire are totally infuriated by this. What do you mean you're crowning this barbarian as, an emperor of Rome? This is totally unacceptable. Again, divide more between East and West. Charlemagne was not your typical barbarian, though. He was very well educated, spoke Latin and Greek. He sang in his own church choir, and he was very devoted to the Catholic faith. Very much so. The problem, but he's not perfect. He liked to appoint his own bishops that would do the things he wanted them to do. He often sometimes resorted to forced conversions and you're going to convert or I'm going to kill you kind of thing. So very kind of overzealous at times. Good intention, good guy overall, but sometimes got a little carried away in his promoting of the faith. But again, this alliance between the Franks and the Catholic Church in Rome. And really talk about that all to bring up kind of one of the saddest events in church history, right, is the Great Schism, the break between the East and Western churches. Again, it's been building up for years, the different heresies, and that's the problem too, is often these heresies became very popular with the Roman emperors, or the Eastern Roman emperors. So there's this constant kind of fighting. It's been a lot of lead up, but we count 1054 as the official break between the East and the West. Continued battles over difference in language, again, Greek and Rome, little nitpicky things about the way that the creed is said. The people in the Eastern Roman Empire don't like the Pope in Rome calling the shots on things. Often there's these alliances between the emperors in Constantinople and heretical bishops, because it actually helps the emperor out in some way. The iconoclasm controversy. So everything kind of comes to a head in 1054. There's this patriarch Michael Caelarius, Patriarch of Constantinople. He's not a fan of celibacy for priests. He's like, why do we have to use unleavened bread? I don't like that we don't say the Alleluia, in Lent and Advent. And he's going to close down Latin Rite parishes. And there's some other things that go on. And he refuses to recognize the Pope as the supreme authority in the church. The Pope's like, all right, we got to take care of this. So he sends off 2 cardinals to go to Constantinople. These guys are not very diplomatic, they're not the best negotiators, the whole thing kind of breaks down, and they end up excommunicating the patriarch. The patriarch says, fine. He turns around and excommunicates the Pope, and it's this big, big deal. And the Pope dies in the middle of all this, so the chair of Peter is empty. Really sad situation. And so the schism between the West and the East is finalized. But again, it's not like this moment it just happens. It's been building for centuries. Political, religious, language, geographic differences. Again, we're talking about, the Pope in Rome and Constantinople, and just the physical and then spiritual difference between the two. So it's this sad thing that exists very to this day. We have two traditions, Eastern and Western. Roman Catholic Church, what we are, and Eastern Orthodox is the Eastern Rite. Same sacraments, but the biggest difference is on the authority and jurisdiction on the Pope, of the Pope. And so you've got like the Eastern Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox Church. Now, it's not exclusive. There are some, what we call more Eastern Rite churches that are united with Rome. This is like the Ukrainian Catholics, the Maronite Catholics. There's actually, I think, like 15 different Catholic churches. There's the Roman Catholic Church is like 99% of everybody, but then there are others that they're, again, Maronite Catholic, Ukrainian Catholic. They're united to the Pope. Their sacraments are totally valid, but they're just not Roman Rite. But then you've got like the Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox that don't consider themselves Catholic because they don't follow the Pope. So kind of a sad situation, and it's really strange. Like this happened over 1,000 years ago. People over there are still like fired up about it. Like it's the strangest thing. It's almost like the closest thing I would compare it to is, you know how like you go to the South and they're still like fired up about the Civil War in some places. It's like, dude, it happened like 100 years ago. Like and you guys were wrong, and it's over, and we've done on, we've forgiven, we've moved on. But it's kind of the same thing between the East and the West as far as this great schism too. Lot of hurt feelings even today in an odd way. But it's kind of that North-South, East-West thing. Again, the North-South divide in the United States is the closest thing I can compare it to. We're all Americans, right? But it's still a thing. We should all be Catholics. It's still this point of contention. So I have 5 minutes to do 1,000 years. I'm not going to try to do it. I do want to talk just a little bit about the Crusades, because I think that's a point of contention that people kind of get worried about. So, and it's like, well, these Catholics are killing Muslims in the Middle East, and what is this whole Crusade thing? The Catholic Church very much saw it as a defensive war. With the rise of the Seljuk Turks, they were expanding the Muslim Empire in the Middle East, so expanding into areas that previously been held by the Eastern Roman Empire. In 1071, they annihilated, totally destroyed the Byzantine Empire, and the Muslims were expanding their empire. And the Eastern Roman Emperor, in a moment of humility, actually went to Pope Urban and said, will you guys help us? We're getting overrun here. We can't defend our lands. And the Muslims, they'd come through and they'd kill Christians. They'd enslave them, or at least force them to pay very high taxes. It was not a good situation at all. So in a lot of ways, the Eastern Roman Empire kind of swallowed his pride and said, we need your help because we're gonna get destroyed here. So Pope Blessed Urban II called for people to come to defend Christendom, is the way they pitched it. And so again, it was seen as a defensive war. We have to stop this Islamic onslaught. They're just going to come through and take over our churches and our institutions and everything that, again, very much civilization to its core is the way it was understood. So not an offensive war, not we got to go down there and knock these people out. No, we have to defend Europe and Christianity. So there's these series of 7 crusades. The first one is, so there's two points, right? It's free the Holy Land so that pilgrims can be able to go there and not be stoned and killed when they go to pilgrimage to Jerusalem, but then also stop Muslim expansion. The first one's the one that's really only successful. Godfrey of Bellin and 4 other armies, they make it all the way to Jerusalem. They do liberate Jerusalem and set up kind of a small kingdom, feudal-style kingdom in the Middle East. The problem is it's impossible to defend because it's still surrounded by Turks everywhere, and the Crusaders are like, yep, so we freed Jerusalem, we're going home now. And Godfrey of Bellin's like, yeah, I'm supposed to defend this area. So then they're overrun about 100 years later, and so then there's these series of 7 crusades. Some of them are absolute debacles, some of them never even get there. one decides, we're going to take a detour and sack Constantinople and take their stuff because they're rich. Like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be fighting the Muslims. You're taking the money from it, and that further hurts this divide between East and West. So it kind of goes off the rails. The first one's successful, it accomplishes the mission. The second most famous one is the third, because that's King Henry the Lionhearted is a part of that. His great battles with Saladin, who was an honorable Islamic commander, and they're kind of jousting and they're jockeying for military victories in the Middle East. That one's kind of the stuff of legends. But even King Richard the Lionhearted is unsuccessful. Gets stopped at the gates of Jerusalem, unable to liberate the city. So again, it was seen very much as a defensive war in defense of Christendom and pilgrims, stopping the Muslim expansion. It was not some, we have to go kill these people. It was very much seen as a defensive war, and one that was very necessary, and also one that is going to lead Europe that had been very isolated and expose them to Islamic math and medicine and learning. It's going to eventually open up Europe for markets of, hey, in the East they got all these spices and goods and silk that we'd really like to have in Europe. And you can pretty much draw a line from the Crusades to the Age of Exploration and Christopher Columbus wanting to find other trade routes to avoid the Middle East. So again, by and large unsuccessful, but I think taken with the right motivations initially, but tremendously influential as far as the course of human history and what kind of comes out of there. Again, bringing learning and education and knowledge from these people of the Middle East to Europe, and then a desire for travel and exploration around the world. So the church kind of gets beat up for the Crusades, but not necessarily all that bad a thing. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what it was and what the purpose was. Again, it was not some offensive, we have to go down there and force these Muslims to convert. You know, it was not the intent. Again, it was actually a moment of solidarity between the Christian West and the Christian East, as far as we have to go protect the Eastern Roman Empire as well. So I'm pretty happy I got through 1,000 of 2,000 years. Did not get to Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, and I'm sorry about that, because that's a ton of fun to talk about. But this is kind of a smattering a little bit, right, of these heroes in church history and how there's all these challenges, and the church is always able to meet them and often changes and flexes and is responsive to the needs of the time. It's not like, well, this is the way we've always done it, too bad for you. No, the church is very much a part of the world and responds to the needs and the times of the world. And hopefully you got a sense of that a little bit from this talk. So any quick questions, and also if there's something you would like to know more about in church history, or something just in general, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. Specifically, we can set up a time. I got all kinds of cool notes to go through all kinds of more funny stories that I didn't get to about saints and their exploits. So, but hopefully that was just kind of a taste of the vastness of because really the history of the church is the history of the world. The church has been a part of it for 2,000 years. So, thank you. And any initial questions you need to take a whack at? All right. Thank you guys, and we'll talk later. All right. Appreciate it.